This is a response to Neotropic. I've been a big fan of your videos for a long time, but this last one, Atheists are morally superior, kind of, I'm not going to say struck a nerve, but it kind of made me think a little bit about your position. First off, I have to say that it's kind of strange that you would just kind of bring this up, because I know there are a lot of Christians out there who say, that Christians are morally superior to atheists simply because they use the Bible, which I don't really advocate that thought process, simply because, you can't just say that because one person believes a certain book actually makes them more morally superior. But I do have a few points that I'd like to make. First off, not all Christians follow the Bible because they fear punishment. Not all Christians behave morally because they're afraid of hell. A lot of Christians, myself included, do so because we like to do nice things for people. I used to be an atheist, and I was a nice person. At least I consider myself as such back then. And I don't really think my behavior has changed too terribly much since then. Just my belief structure. So, there are some Christians who are only moral people because they fear punishment, which I wouldn't necessarily mean that makes them bad people. That just makes them, kind of evil at heart. But that's kind of the way that God has his checks and balances, is if you were not a nice person, he kind of makes you a nice person. So, it's kind of a gradual thing. Most people find that, or at least most people I know, find that once they start to be a nice person, whatever reason they start doing it, it kind of just becomes habit. And I think that most of the time, if you have someone who is not particularly a nice person, the best way to get them to behave themselves is to threaten them. So I don't necessarily advocate that, but it does seem to be very true. And I do know a lot of atheists that are not very good people. So your statement that atheists are good people because they want to be better to people and want to be a betterment to society, there are a lot of atheists out there that I know. There are a lot of atheists out there that are they're terrible people in general. It's kind of a bland statement. All Christians are this way, all atheists are that way. You're not really getting anywhere with that. A second point I wanted to make was when you talked about Stalin and other people that Christians use to claim that atheists are immoral people. So such and so did this and so did that. They were an atheist. That means all atheists are. Yeah, that's a stupid argument. A lot of intelligent Christians are aware of that. You don't really have to point that out to us. And it kind of makes the ones of us that are on your side, or those of us that are on your side, excuse me, kind of makes us feel sort of like you're just kind of grouping everyone, which I know atheists don't like to be grouped, considering you guys aren't particularly a group. You're just people who don't believe in a deity or God. I'm aware of that. But likewise, I don't think it's very nice to group Christians like that. To say all Christians think that that's a good argument. It's not a great argument, I'm aware of that. But I believe your video, if I'm mistaken, said that if we use that as a counterpoint, as an argument against atheism, that we have to believe that it's rationally justifiable. I don't agree with that. I will say that if we thought it was rationally justifiable, then we wouldn't be arguing against it. Because we would be able to say that you could rationally justify it. What argument would we have against that? Things we can rationally justify, most people don't argue against. That's kind of the reason they're rationally justified. No one really argues against them. So I would say more that when we say that so-and-so did this, that means that atheists are bad people. It really is, we're saying that that is not justifiable, that they're bad people. They're bad people all around. Still, I don't really advocate that as an argument against atheism. That my point still remains. But I didn't really like how you just kind of went against the gradient there for a moment. But aside from that, at the very end, it sounded very elitist. which was kind of a surprise to me. Your video was trying to say that you are moral people, that you're morally superior to Christians. Now, if a Christian were to say, I'm morally superior to an atheist because I'm a Christian, you would probably come back at him and saying, you're an elitist, because you believe that just because you're a Christian, that makes you morally superior to me. But at the end of your video, when you tried to basically prove that Christians were not morally superior, you came out with a bland statement of saying atheists were morally superior, which in itself is a very elitist statement. And I think we can all agree that elitism is not very moral, or not very morally correct. I'll try and use that. But simply, what I'm trying to say is, if I were to come out and be very arrogant, most people would say that that's wrong, to be an arrogant or very prideful person, which I think if we can agree that that's morally wrong, that would make you morally inferior to someone who doesn't do that. So, you're kind of, at the very end of your argument, you're kind of erasing your own argument, or countering it. So, what I'd say is, even though that the research shows that Christians aren't exactly always the most moral people, because a lot of Christians really fail at following their own religion. I'll agree with that. There are a very, very small number of Christians out there that actually do follow the Bible. And it's a sad fact. But that doesn't necessarily mean that atheists are more moral people. I mean, you guys are a bit smaller group of people. If you were to widen your group, I'm sure you'd get a few crazies, just like we do. So, that's all I'm trying to say is, kind of be careful about where your arguments go and try and keep a check on how moral you are.